There is a specific suffocating silence that wraps around a mother when her child pushes her away to please a stranger. You swallow the glass, smile through the phone, and wait for the bleeding to stop. But when my phone vibrated violently at 3 minutes past midnight on Christmas Eve, it was not a late apology for my daughter. It was the sound of my ex-husband's perfect new life being torn apart by the federal government. Hello, dear listeners of Maya Revenge Stories, and thank you so genuinely for being here with us. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely disabled monetization on our channel, leaving us without the budget needed to keep things running. If you find today's story compelling, we would deeply appreciate it if you could support us with just $1. This small contribution allows us to pay our dedicated staff so they can manage their living expenses and continue creating these thrilling stories for you. You can easily support us by scanning the quick response code on your screen or by clicking the donation link found in the video description or the comments section below. My name is Octavia Baxter. I am 43 years old, and I am a senior forensic data analyst. On this particular evening, I was sitting entirely alone, working the graveyard holiday shift at the Advanced Threat Synthesis Agency in Austin, Texas. The massive intelligence facility was effectively a ghost town. Row after row of empty desks sat in the dark, illuminated only by the sterile blue glow of my dual monitors. My career taught me that data points never lie, but people always do. I spend my days tracing hidden digital footprints, uncovering the ugly truths people try to bury beneath firewalls and encrypted drives. But all the analytical skills in the world could not protect me from the simple, devastating math of a broken family. Just 3 days prior, my 19-year-old daughter, Maya, had called me. I could hear the agonizing hesitation in her breath before she even spoke. She had called to nervously revoke my invitation to our traditional Christmas dinner. Maya stammered through the excuse her father had clearly fed her. My ex-husband, Garrett, and his remarkably young new wife, Sloane, had decided they needed a completely private, closed-off holiday to build their new family. Having the ex-wife present, they claimed, would disrupt the delicate energy of their first real holiday as a married couple. The rejection hung heavily in the air between us. The pain of being pushed aside for a stranger was still a fresh wound, but I refused to let it show. I did not argue. I did not cry where she could hear me. I kept my voice impossibly bright and endlessly understanding. Of course, sweetheart, I think that is a wonderful idea for you all, I told her, making absolutely certain Maya would not carry even an ounce of guilt. I hung up the phone knowing my Christmas dinner would consist of a single heated tin of sodium-heavy soup in a silent apartment. I chose to volunteer for the holiday shift at the agency just to have a reason to get dressed and leave the house. Now, sitting in the absolute stillness of the agency office, I watched the digital clock on my monitor tick forward. The silence of the room was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the server towers cooling themselves in the server room down the hall. Then, my personal cell phone vibrated violently against the metal desk. The screen flashed, cutting through the dark. It was exactly 3 minutes past 12 in the morning. Christmas had officially arrived. It was not a late apology from my daughter. When I answered, I was met with the sound of pure, unadulterated terror. Maya was weeping hysterically, her breaths coming in ragged, panicked gasps. "Mom," she choked out, her voice barely audible over a chaotic symphony of heavy shouting in the background. "Mom, you have to help us. They are everywhere." I sat up straight in my ergonomic chair, my forensic instincts instantly overriding my maternal panic. I demanded she take a breath and tell me exactly what she was seeing. Through her heavy sobs, Maya painted a picture of absolute devastation. A fleet of heavily armored black sports utility vehicles had just violently breached the gates of Garrett's $2 million estate. Dozens of federal agents in full tactical gear were currently swarming the pristine, manicured lawns, their heavy boots trampling the imported holiday decorations. The Pentagon had authorized a massive raid, and they were demanding to interrogate Garrett right this second. The flawless, highly curated facade of Garrett's wealthy new life was shattering in real time. Maya described the scene with horrifying clarity. My ex-husband, a man who prided himself on his icy corporate dominance and untouchable arrogance, was currently on his knees in the grand foyer. He was screaming in raw panic, begging the agents to listen to him, crying like a cornered animal as they read him his rights. But it was the detail about his new wife that made the blood freeze in my veins. "Where is Sloane?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous, clinical whisper. Maya let out another terrified sob. She ran upstairs the second they breached the front door. She locked herself inside the master bathroom. "Mom, she took Garrett's heavily encrypted work laptop with her, and she refuses to come out." I slammed my hand down on the secure logout terminal. The dual screens of my workstation faded to absolute black, severing my connection to the agency mainframe. I grabbed my tactical jacket from the back of the chair and sprinted toward the underground parking garage. The hollow echo of my boots against the concrete was the only sound until I pushed open the heavy steel exit doors. The Texas weather had deteriorated into a violent, chaotic storm. Sheets of freezing rain lashed against the dimly lit parking structure. I threw myself into the driver's seat of my heavy Jeep, ignited the engine, and tore out onto the flooded streets, pressing the accelerator aggressively toward the floor. The windshield wipers fought a desperate, losing battle against the torrential downpour. In the span of a single minute, I had completely shed the skin of the discarded ex-wife. The raw, calculated adrenaline of a seasoned operative firmly took the wheel. My phone remained linked to the audio system of the Jeep. Maya stayed on the line, her voice trembling violently over the deafening roar of the engine and the relentless assault of the rain on the roof. "They are tearing the walls apart. Mom," she whispered frantically, coughing through her tears. "There are men in tactical gear ripping the custom server racks straight out of the basement. They are throwing everything into heavy plastic bins. Dad is on the floor. They keep screaming at him about aerospace artificial intelligence blueprints. They are asking him who he sold them to." I slammed my foot onto the brake pedal as a pair of blinding headlights swerved recklessly into my lane, barely avoiding a catastrophic collision on the slick asphalt. My heart hammered wildly against my ribs, but the sudden rush of terror was not from the near crash. Aerospace artificial intelligence blueprints. The phrase echoed menacingly in the tight, oxygen-deprived cabin of the Jeep. My mind aggressively rewound to 2 years ago, straight back into the ugliest, most venomous months of our divorce proceedings. Garrett had orchestrated a highly coordinated, vicious smear campaign against me. He had approached his corporate superiors and subtly, brilliantly suggested that I was the one carelessly handling those exact classified blueprints. It was a deeply calculated, devastating lie designed to completely destroy my professional credibility, force my immediate resignation, and secure him 99% control of our financial assets. I had spent 18 agonizing months fighting brutal internal investigations, sitting in windowless rooms taking polygraph tests, and fighting tooth and nail to defend my top-secret security clearance. The profound trauma of his false accusation had nearly pushed me to abandon the intelligence community forever. Now, the federal government was actively tearing his multi-million-dollar mansion down to the studs, searching for those very same files. I was less than 5 miles away from his highly secure gated community, pushing the heavy Jeep well past 80 miles per hour on the dangerous interstate, when a new incoming call violently overrode the connection with my daughter. The digital display on my dashboard flashed a restricted government routing number. My forensic training immediately recognized the encrypted signature. I aggressively tapped the screen to accept the connection. "Octavia Baxter," a deep, commanding voice boomed through the surrounding speakers, cutting through the ambient noise of the storm. "This is Special Agent Vance with the Department of Defense. You need to pull your vehicle over to the shoulder of the highway immediately. I am currently en route to retrieve my daughter from an active federal raid." I fired back, my tone dropping an octave, leaving absolutely zero room for negotiation or debate. "I am not stopping this car for anyone. Your daughter is being secured and isolated by my tactical team as we speak, Ms. Baxter," Agent Vance replied, his voice maintaining a terrifyingly calm and steady authority. She is unharmed, but you are absolutely not going to that house tonight. You are taking the very next exit and heading straight to our temporary field office located in downtown Austin. That is a direct federal order, and I have units standing by to intercept you if you refuse." I gripped the thick leather of the steering wheel until my knuckles turned stark white. My eyes locked on the blurred red taillights of the traffic ahead. Give me one legitimate reason why I should abandon my only child in the middle of a chaotic tactical extraction. Because Garrett is not the victim of a random corporate cybersecurity audit, Vance stated flatly, the weight of his words dropping heavily into the space between us. Your ex-husband is the primary, Tier 1 target of a multi-agency counterintelligence operation. He is the central node in a massive defense industrial espionage ring. If you show up at that perimeter right now, my men will be legally forced to detain you in handcuffs as a potential co-conspirator. If that happens, neither of us will be in any position to protect your daughter from the fallout. The words hit me with the kinetic force of a physical blow. The scattered puzzle pieces that had been unconsciously floating in the back of my mind suddenly snapped into perfect, horrifying alignment. Sloane, the fiercely young, fiercely image-obsessed new wife, the sudden, absolute insistence on a completely private, isolated Christmas holiday without any outside interference whatsoever. They did not ruthlessly exclude me from the family dinner table simply because I was an irritating reminder of Garrett's past failures. They excluded me because I am a senior forensic data analyst, having me sitting idly in their sprawling living room, sipping holiday eggnog while they attempted to execute a massive treasonous data transfer to foreign buyers, would have been a profoundly suicidal move. They needed an empty house. They needed absolutely zero surveillance. They needed a quiet, undisturbed holiday weekend to systematically sell out national security. The pain of the earlier rejection evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, sharpened fury. I jerked the steering wheel hard to the right, taking the downtown exit, driving straight into the eye of the storm. The federal field office in downtown Austin did not exist on any public directory. It was housed inside a brutalist concrete structure disguised as a regional water management facility. I bypassed the empty front lobby and walked directly into the subterranean garage, where two armed sentries escorted me through a series of interlocking steel doors. The air inside the facility was excessively dry and smelled faintly of ozone and stale coffee. We bypassed the standard interrogation rooms and moved straight into a secure compartmented information facility. Special Agent Vance was waiting for me. He was a broad, aggressively neat man in a tailored charcoal suit, his eyes carrying the heavy exhaustion of someone who had been tracking a ghost for months. He did not offer his hand to shake. He simply gestured to the stainless steel table in the center of the room, which was entirely covered in high-resolution satellite imagery, printed network logs, and a single, glowing tactical monitor. "Take a seat, Ms. Baxter," Vance said, his voice entirely devoid of warmth. "We have a massive problem, and right now, you are standing dead center in the blast radius." I sat down, keeping my posture perfectly rigid, my face an unreadable mask. "Show me the data." Vance tapped a key on the terminal, bringing up a complex web of packet traces. For the past 8 months, highly classified artificial intelligence schematics have been bleeding out of a Department of Defense contractor database. We traced the encrypted data packets through a dozen proxy servers scattered across Eastern Europe, but the perpetrators got sloppy tonight. They tried to push a massive data payload in a single transfer to meet a buyer deadline. The firewall caught a snag, stripped the proxy masking for exactly 4 seconds, and gave us the true origin point. He zoomed in on a specific string of numbers. It was an Internet Protocol address. I recognized it instantly. It belonged to the custom, high-bandwidth fiber optic router Garrett had installed in his home office last year. "They were transferring the files from his study," I stated, my eyes scanning the hexadecimal code flooding the right side of the screen. But as I read deeper into the raw data, my breath caught violently in my throat. I leaned closer to the monitor, my eyes narrowing at a specific, seemingly random string of alphanumeric characters embedded deep within the file headers. It was a ghost watermark. My stomach plummeted into an icy abyss. Years ago, during the suffocating final months of our marriage, I began noticing strange discrepancies in our joint checking accounts. Massive withdrawals vanished into shell companies. Garrett swore it was just aggressive investment strategies, but my instincts screamed otherwise. I used my clearance and my skills to write a highly sophisticated, completely invisible tracking script. I buried it deep within the operating system of his personal laptop to monitor his financial movements. I had entirely forgotten about that code after the divorce finalized, but looking at the screen right now, I saw my own digital fingerprint glaring back at me, wrapped tightly around stolen national security documents. Vance watched my reaction like a hawk studying its prey. "You recognize the signature," he said, and it was not a question. I looked up, meeting his cold stare. "That is my code." Vance leaned over the table, resting his heavy knuckles on the metal surface. 10 minutes ago, my field agents dragged your ex-husband out of his foyer and tossed him into the back of an armored transport. Do you want to know what he was screaming at the top of his lungs? Ms. Baxter. He was screaming your name. He claimed he was completely innocent. He told my team that he recently discovered you had hacked into his home network. He swore to God that his bitter, unstable ex-wife planted those stolen aerospace files on his servers as a final act of psychotic revenge to destroy his new marriage. The sheer audacity of the lie was breathtaking. Garrett was cornered by the federal government, facing decades in a federal penitentiary, and his immediate, instinctual reaction was to use me as a human shield. He thought he could weaponize my own tracking code against me. He thought he could play the victim one last time. A terrifying, absolute calm washed over me. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a low, electrical hum. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend my character. I simply leaned forward and pointed a perfectly steady finger at the monitor. "Agent Vance," I said, my voice dropping to a clinical, razor-sharp whisper. "If you have read my file, you know I am not a standard network technician. I am a forensic architect. When I built that ghost watermark to track my husband's hidden finances 3 years ago, I did not just write a simple executable file. I tied the activation sequence to biometric keystroke dynamics." Vance frowned, his eyes flicking from me to the screen. "Explain." "Every human being on this planet types on a keyboard with a completely unique rhythm," I explained, shifting into the cold, authoritative cadence I used during congressional hearings. "There are 2 metrics we measure: dwell time, which is exactly how many milliseconds you hold a key down, and flight time, which is the exact microsecond delay it takes your finger to travel from one specific key to the next. It is a biometric signature as entirely unique as a retinal scan or a fingerprint. I coded that watermark to remain entirely dormant unless it verified the user. It would only attach itself to outbound data if the person typing matched Garrett's exact proprietary keystroke biometrics. I have his typing cadence mapped out to the thousandth of a second. I let the silence stretch out, allowing the immense weight of the science to crush Garrett's pathetic lie into dust. Someone did not remotely plant those files on his server. "Agent Vance," I concluded, staring dead into his eyes. Garrett sat in his ergonomic chair, in his custom home office, and manually transferred those files himself. The math is absolute. It is irrefutable. Vance stared at me for a long, heavy moment. Then, the corner of his mouth twitched upward in a grim, approving smile. He tapped a folder on the table, flipping it open to reveal pages of heavily redacted financial statements. "We already knew he was lying," Vance admitted, his tone shifting from accusatory to strictly collaborative. "We pulled his offshore accounts 20 minutes ago. The pristine, multi-million-dollar lifestyle he portrays online is a complete and total fabrication. Garrett and his new wife are drowning in over $4 million of aggressive, high-interest debt. She spends hundreds of thousands of dollars a year maintaining a wealthy influencer persona on social media. While his corporate investments completely cratered last quarter, they were backed into a financial corner. A foreign buyer offered them $10 million for the aerospace blueprints. Tonight was the final handover. But you do not have the files, I deduced instantly, thinking back to Maya's panicked phone call. You said the firewall caught a snag. The transfer was interrupted, and Maya told me Sloane locked herself in the master bathroom with Garrett's encrypted work laptop. Exactly, Vance said, his expression darkening into a scowl. The files on his server are heavily fragmented. The master decryption key to assemble the data is on that laptop. Sloane has it. My tactical team can easily kick the bathroom door off its hinges, but the laptop is rigged with a thermal failsafe. If we breach aggressively, or if she panics and types the wrong password, the hard drive will physically slag itself into melted plastic. We lose the decryption key, we lose the buyer's identity, and we lose the entire espionage case. Vance looked at me, his eyes practically pleading for a solution. The federal government had brute force, but brute force would destroy the evidence. They needed a scalpel. They needed a Trojan horse. I slowly stood up from the stainless steel table, smoothing out the wrinkles in my tactical jacket. The ghost of the weak, discarded ex-wife was entirely gone. I was the senior operative now, and I was holding all the cards. She will not open that door for men with guns, I said coldly. She is terrified. She is cornered, and she knows she is holding the only bargaining chip left, but she will open the door for a pathetic, desperate mother who just wants to get her daughter out of a war zone. Vance stood up slowly, realizing exactly what I was offering. I will go back to the house, I told him, mapping out the tactical operation in my head. I will play the hysterical, frantic ex-wife. I will bypass your perimeter. I will tell them I can use my high-level security clearance at the agency to create a fake exit node, a digital backdoor out of the federal grid so they can finish the transfer and escape. I will stroke his massive ego, and I will play directly into her panic. I will get them to initiate the final decryption, and right when they expose the key, we will drop the hammer on them both. Vance studied my face, looking for any sign of hesitation, any lingering emotional attachment to the man who had destroyed our family. He found absolutely nothing but cold, calculating resolve. All right, Ms. Baxter, Vance said, handing me a small, encrypted earpiece. Let us go hunt them down. 22 minutes later, my heavy tires ground to a harsh halt on the slick driveway of Garrett's $2 million estate. The flashing red and blue lights of over a dozen federal vehicles cut fiercely through the freezing Texas rain. As planned, Special Agent Vance had subtly radioed his perimeter guards. Instead of detaining me, two heavily armed men in dark tactical gear stepped backward, lowering their rifles and intentionally parting the yellow crime scene tape to allow me access to the front door. The interior of the mansion was a landscape of total devastation. The imported Italian marble floors were covered in muddy boot prints. Custom drywall had been smashed open, revealing severed fiber optic cables hanging like dead vines. Standing in the center of the ruined grand foyer was Garrett. He was physically unhurt, but his meticulously crafted aura of corporate invincibility had entirely vanished. Instead, he was aggressively playing the victim. He had Maya cornered against the grand staircase, tightly gripping her shoulders. I stopped in the shadowy hallway, remaining entirely out of sight, and listened to the man I used to love actively poison our daughter's mind. You have to understand, Maya, Garrett pleaded, his voice trembling with a masterfully fabricated sorrow. Your mother never recovered from the divorce. She is deeply unwell. Her mind is fractured. She has access to all these terrifying intelligence systems, and she used them to frame me. She planted those stolen documents on my servers because she wants to completely destroy my new family. She is trying to send me to a federal prison out of pure, psychotic jealousy. My blood turned to absolute ice. The sheer magnitude of his narcissistic manipulation was staggering. He was cornered by the Defense Department, facing a lifetime behind bars, and his immediate instinct was to weaponize our teenage daughter against me. In the adjacent formal dining room, Sloane was in a state of absolute manic panic. The young woman who had haughtily uninvited me to Christmas dinner was now frantically stuffing thousands of dollars worth of designer clothing into a massive leather suitcase. She was trembling violently, her mascara running down her flushed cheeks in dark, ugly streaks, clutched tightly under her left arm, pressed against her ribs like an infant, was the heavy silver encrypted laptop. "We have to leave right now." "Garrett," Sloane shrieked, her voice shrill and breaking. "The agents are waiting outside. We have to get to the secure legal safe house before the press gets wind of this. We need to go." It was time to give the performance of my life. I took a deep, steadying breath, forcefully burying the senior intelligence operative deep down inside, and resurrected the ghost of the broken, subservient ex-wife. I let my shoulders slump forward, softening my posture to project total defeat. I forced tears to pool in my eyes and let my hands shake visibly. I stepped out of the shadows and into the glaring light of the foyer. Garrett froze, his eyes widening in genuine shock at my sudden appearance. Before he could mount a defense, I rushed forward, my voice practically breaking with manufactured desperation. "Garrett, I came as fast as I could," I cried out, keeping my tone perfectly submissive and entirely compliant. "I saw the news alerts on the agency grid. I heard what you were telling Maya, and I believe you. I know you. Garrett, you are a brilliant visionary. You are far too smart to ever make a catastrophic mistake like this. Someone at your firm must have set you up. The federal government is completely blind, but I am not." His eyes darted around the room, utterly bewildered by my immediate surrender. His ego, an absolutely bottomless pit of arrogance, absorbed my flattery exactly like a sponge. Behavioral psychology dictates that a narcissist in crisis will blindly accept any narrative that paints them as a misunderstood genius. "I can help you," I whispered frantically, taking a step closer, invading his personal space while radiating nothing but pure empathy. "I still have my Tier 1 security clearance at the agency. I can log into the federal grid right now and create a temporary digital blind spot, a fake exit node. It will scramble their tracking systems for exactly 45 minutes. That is more than enough time for you and Sloane to slip past the perimeter and get to your lawyers. But you have to trust me." Garrett stared at me, his chest heaving. The sheer relief washing over his face was pathetic to witness. He completely let his guard down, fully believing that his undeniable charm had once again subdued his weak, foolish ex-wife. "Do it," Garrett commanded, regaining a fraction of his old, arrogant authority. He turned his back to me, moving quickly toward the dining room to calm his hysterical new wife. "Sloane, stop crying. Octavia is going to scramble the perimeter. Get the bags ready." He gave me exactly 12 seconds of an unobserved window. It was more than enough. In the chaotic frenzy of the moment, I stepped up right directly behind Sloane. She was aggressively zipping a duffel bag. The silver laptop momentarily set down on the dining table next to her open designer purse, with the practiced, invisible sleight of hand of a veteran field agent. I retrieved a micro-tracking chip from the hidden seam of my tactical jacket. It was an agency-issued transponder, weighing barely 2 grams, designed to emit a continuous military-grade locator beacon. I smoothly slid my hand over her open purse and dropped the tiny device straight down into the deep, dark lining of the expensive bag. I knew exactly what was about to happen. Sloane was not packing for a legal safe house. She was packing for a flight. She was going to run. And now, the entire United States intelligence apparatus would be tracking her exact coordinates. With the tracker secured, I backed away from the dining table. The submissive, weeping mask instantly evaporated from my face, replaced by a cold, terrifying authority. I walked swiftly over to where Maya was standing frozen by the staircase. I positioned my body to entirely block her from Garrett's line of sight. I reached out and gripped my daughter's wrists, my fingers squeezing with undeniable, protective strength. I leaned in, bringing my mouth just an inch from her ear. "Listen to me very carefully," I ordered, my voice a razor-sharp whisper carrying absolute zero warmth. "You are going to walk upstairs. You will pack exactly 1 small bag with only your essential items. You will not speak to your father, and you will not look at Sloane. You will walk straight back down those stairs, and you will get directly into my vehicle. Do you understand me?" Maya looked into my eyes, her breath hitching. She had never seen this version of me before. She was looking at the apex predator of the Advanced Threat Synthesis Agency. She gave a single, terrified nod. "Good," I stated flatly. "Move, now, because in less than 60 minutes, this entire property is going to become the epicenter of a life sentence." I dropped Maya off at an undisclosed, highly secure boutique hotel in the center of the city, leaving 2 heavily armed federal agents stationed directly outside her door. The moment I knew she was completely safe, I retreated to the underground parking structure of the federal building, climbed into the back of Special Agent Vance's heavily armored mobile command center, and plugged my secure agency terminal directly into their tactical grid. The large monitors lining the reinforced steel walls flared to life, displaying a highly detailed, real-time satellite map of the greater Austin area. A single, violently bright red dot was moving rapidly across the digital grid. The microscopic transponder I had smoothly slipped into Sloane's designer purse was broadcasting a perfect, uninterrupted military-grade tracking signal. Just as behavioral psychology had predicted, the fiercely ambitious young wife had instantly chosen absolute self-preservation over her marriage. Sloane had absolutely no intention of fleeing to a secure legal safe house to protect her husband. The very second Garrett had turned his back to desperately negotiate with the federal agents at the front door, she had slipped entirely unnoticed through the subterranean garage. She had stolen his high-performance luxury sports car and aggressively fled the perimeter. The tracker showed she was currently barreling toward a private aviation strip located on the desolate, completely unlit outskirts of the city. She was carrying the highly encrypted laptop and intending to abscond with the entire $10 million foreign payout entirely for herself. Inside the quiet hum of the mobile command center, the secure tactical line on my console suddenly began to ring. I glanced down at the caller identification display. It was Garrett. I reached out and tapped the screen to answer the call, simultaneously activating the permanent federal evidence recording software. The voice that came crashing through the overhead speakers was completely unrecognizable. The arrogant, untouchable corporate titan I had been married to was entirely gone. In his place was a pathetic, shattered shell of a man sobbing uncontrollably into the receiver. "Octavia," Garrett gasped, his breath hitching in raw, unadulterated panic. "Octavia, you have to help me right now. She took it. Sloane took the laptop. She took the car, and she completely abandoned me here. I managed to lock myself inside the basement server room, but the tactical agents are actively cutting through the reinforced steel door with heavy thermal torches." I leaned back slowly in the heavy tactical chair, watching the red dot on the monitor inch closer and closer to the private runway. I remained completely silent, letting the absolute terror of his inescapable reality crush him. "It gets worse," Garrett wept, his voice cracking violently over the secure line. "I tried to log into my offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands to wire emergency funds for a defense attorney. It is all gone. Octavia, every single account shows a zero balance. The federal government froze absolutely everything. I have nothing left. Please, you have to use your administrative access at the agency. You promised you would create a digital blind spot. You have to get me out of this nightmare." He was practically hyperventilating, entirely desperate and completely stripped of his meticulously crafted armor. Cornered and terrified, he immediately resorted to the cheap, emotional manipulation he had weaponized against me so effectively during our marriage. "I never stopped loving you," Garrett cried, his words tumbling out in a pathetic, desperate rush. "Sloane was a massive mistake. She manipulated me into this entire espionage deal. She forced me to negotiate with the foreign buyers. I was weak, but I'm still the father of your child. You have to save me. Octavia, please, I am begging you on my knees." I sat in the dim blue light of the command center, listening to his frantic, cowardly confessions being permanently logged into the impenetrable federal evidence database. For years, this man had been the towering monster of my nightmares. He had systematically destroyed my confidence, stolen my financial stability, and nearly ruined my entire professional career with his vicious, calculated lies. I had spent countless sleepless nights agonizing over his cruelty. But right now, hearing him whimper and beg over a recorded line, the towering monster completely dissolved. He was not a criminal mastermind. He was just a hollow, pathetic coward grasping at smoke. "The thermal torches are almost through the door," Garrett screamed, the sound of heavy grinding metal echoing loudly through his end of the phone call. "Octavia, say something." I leaned forward, pressing my lips incredibly close to the microphone. "Goodbye, Garrett," I said, my voice completely devoid of any emotion whatsoever. I reached out and severed the connection permanently. I turned my full attention back to the massive tactical monitor on the wall. The red dot had finally stopped moving. Sloan had arrived at the private airstrip, through the live thermal drone feed broadcasting directly to our screens. I watched as her stolen sports car screeched to a chaotic halt on the dark. Rain-slicked tarmac. A sleek, unmarked private jet was sitting patiently on the runway, its turbine engines already whining loudly in preparation for immediate takeoff. Sloan threw open the car door and sprinted wildly toward the boarding stairs, clutching the heavy silver laptop incredibly tightly to her chest. She was mere seconds away from escaping international airspace with the stolen defense intelligence. She confidently placed her expensive designer heel onto the first metal step of the aircraft. At that exact microsecond, Special Agent Vance leaned into his microphone and gave a single, quiet command over the encrypted radio network. The pitch-black runway instantly erupted into blinding daylight. Dozens of heavily armored federal tactical vehicles, completely hidden in the darkness of the surrounding hangars, simultaneously activated their high-intensity roof lights. The blinding white beams pinned Sloan against the metal stairs of the aircraft like an insect caught abruptly under a microscope. A deafening chorus of police sirens violently shattered the quiet night. Highly trained strike teams poured out of the tactical vehicles, their assault rifles raised and their red tactical lasers converging directly onto the center of her chest. Over the silent drone feed, I watched as the intensely arrogant young woman who had proudly stolen my family and actively tried to sell out my country completely surrendered. She dropped heavily to her knees on the wet, freezing concrete, dropping the encrypted laptop beside her, and throwing her trembling hands high into the relentless rain as the federal agents aggressively swarmed her position. The freezing dawn of Christmas morning cast a harsh, pale light through the single reinforced window of the federal interrogation room. Garrett sat rigidly at the metal table, his wrists bound tightly by heavy steel handcuffs. Despite the dirt on his tailored trousers and the raw terror of the previous night, I watched through the two-way mirror as he desperately tried to assemble the shattered pieces of his ego. He was currently demanding a phone call, haughtily threatening the stoic guards with the wrath of his vastly expensive corporate legal team. He truly believed he could still buy his way out of this nightmare. He thought a clever attorney could spin the narrative, perhaps throwing Sloan entirely under the bus, to secure a comfortable plea deal. The heavy steel door unlatched with a loud, metallic clack. Garrett immediately sat up straighter, adjusting his posture to project authority, fully expecting Special Agent Vance or a high-powered defense lawyer to walk through the frame. Instead, the door swung open to reveal me sitting calmly at the head of the long metal table. The sheer shock on his face was absolute. I was not looking at him as the discarded, emotionally broken ex-wife he had left behind. I was wearing my formal agency credentials on a lanyard around my neck. I sat before him as the lead forensic data analyst of the Advanced Threat Synthesis Agency, the senior intelligence officer holding absolute, unchecked authority over his federal indictment. Garrett opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to try one last desperate manipulation, but the words died instantly in his throat when I slid a thick, heavily classified manila folder across the cold metal table. "You look tired, Garrett," I said, my voice completely level and devoid of any lingering affection or anger. It was the sterile tone of a surgeon about to make a fatal incision. "Your new wife is currently in federal custody. She signed a full, unredacted confession exactly 20 minutes ago. But that is not why I'm sitting here. I leaned forward, resting my hands neatly on top of the folder. I did not just plant a biometric watermark in your network to catch you stealing data, I explained, watching his eyes widen in confusion. When you ruthlessly framed me 2 years ago during our divorce, you taught me a very valuable lesson about your bottomless greed. I knew you would eventually try to monetize your security clearance, so I set a trap. Garrett stared at me, his face rapidly draining of all color. Months ago, I intentionally engineered a highly sophisticated, entirely fake security vulnerability within the agency database. I continued, delivering the fatal blow with absolute precision. I practically laid out a red carpet for you and your foreign buyers. The aerospace artificial intelligence blueprints you and Sloan stole last night were not real. They were highly volatile decoy data. A digital Trojan horse. When your foreign contacts attempt to use the master decryption key Sloan handed over at the airstrip, the files will silently execute a deeply embedded, highly aggressive malware payload. It will permanently wipe their entire intelligence infrastructure off the global grid. The reality of the situation crashed down upon Garrett with the crushing weight of a falling building. He finally understood the magnificent, terrifying scope of his defeat. I had known about his treasonous conspiracy for over 8 months. I had not just quietly built an inescapable net to dismantle a massive international espionage ring, I had expertly weaponized his own monumental arrogance against him. I had used him as an unwitting courier to deliver a lethal cyber weapon to a hostile nation, while simultaneously obliterating his career, his carefully curated public honor, and his freedom, all while perfectly securing the safety of our daughter. Garrett did not scream. He did not cry. His spirit simply collapsed inward, leaving nothing but a hollow, empty shell. When the armed federal guards stepped forward and pulled him to his feet by his biceps, he offered zero resistance. He was escorted out of the interrogation room in absolute, suffocating silence. He was a man with nothing left, walking directly into a void where he would never see the light of day again. By the time I finally left the underground federal facility, the brutal winter storm had passed. The morning sun was reflecting brightly off the ice-covered streets of Austin. I drove back to my small, quiet apartment. When I unlocked the front door, the comforting smell of heated chicken noodle soup filled the air. Maya was sitting safely on our worn-out fabric sofa, wrapped tightly in a thick woolen blanket. She looked up and offered me a small, genuinely exhausted smile. I took off my tactical jacket, walked into the living room, and curled up right beside her. We ate our canned holiday dinner from ceramic mugs and watched a wonderfully silly, incredibly predictable Christmas movie on television. The dark, toxic shadow of my past marriage had been entirely severed at the root. Sitting there in the quiet warmth of my own home, holding my daughter close, I realized I had never felt so powerfully, beautifully free. Thank you so incredibly much for taking the time to listen to my story today. Where in the world are you tuning in from? Please let us know in the comments below. If you found today's journey compelling and want to support our channel, we would be deeply grateful if you could spare just $1. Your generosity allows us to pay our hardworking staff so they can feed their families and continue bringing you the absolute best stories possible. You can easily contribute by scanning the quick response code currently on your screen, or by clicking the donation link provided in the video description and the pinned comment below. Thank you again, and take care of yourselves.